Welcome, Tweener heads. Welcome to the 2022 End of the Year Awards. My name is Philip, and I'm here today with Monday Match Analysis, Gill Gross as my co-host today. And today we have a very special award show for you guys. We're going to have some special guests that you will see introducing some of the awards and nominees. And I'm very excited to bring you this video with Gill today. Gill, thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. How are we doing today?
Thanks, Phil. I'm great. Good to be on again, and always fun to look back at the season at the end. It's because we're in this day-to-day, week-to-week kind of mode throughout the whole year, and I do really enjoy taking a step back and looking at things in an overview sense.
I love it. I love it. And today, it wouldn't be an award show without some alcohol. I am just exhausted. Excuse me. Gill's got the more healthier option of going with coffee.
Well, look, we got the West Coast, East Coast thing.
Yes.
So it's 4:20, coincidentally, local time. 4:20 local time. Where I'm at, that's my afternoon coffee.
That's fair.
You got your 7:20. That's beer. That's booze time. So
that's booze time. That's true. But to get into it, our first award that we're giving out tonight is the most potential for 2023. Since we already looked back at 2022, we saw a recap of many players, whether they were breaking out, whether they were doing well, whether they didn't live up to the potential. But within that category, we're going to be...
Before we continue with this video, I just wanted to say that some of the special guests denied our request from Cameo to introduce the winners of each award. Each award was polled on Twitter and then given by your opinions. So let us know if we missed something. We'll love to hear your opinion. So leave your comments down below of what you guys think or who the winner is for each nominee if you think personally. But for the rest of the video, please enjoy our ATP award show with Gill Gross.
Looking at the most potential that we see with the players that we saw this year for the 2023 season. Now, Gill, I'm going to throw it over to you. And who do you think has the most potential for 2023?
It's someone who showed me a glimpse at the end of 22.
Okay.
Showed me the kind of tennis that I've really wanted to see from him for a long time, and frankly didn't know if we were ever going to get it. And that's Denis Shapovalov, who was playing with a sense of control and discipline after the US Open. That was eye-opening to me. And were his results insane? Did he absolutely tear it up? No. But the brand of tennis he was playing was spot on. And we all know his athletic gifts, his gifts as a ball striker, so much potential there. There were a couple, I was starting to think like, okay, maybe this was always going to be a player who is, I guess, kind of struggles with percentage tennis. And there are a lot of changes I saw, keeping the head more still, controlling the follow through, keeping the feet on the ground, and better shot selection. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Shapo next year and think there's loads of potential.
In terms of our nominee as well, I also chose someone that's young, that has a lot of potential, that won his first title of the 2022 season and first ATP tour level title with Brandon Nakashima, winning in San Diego, winning in his home state, winning in his hometown, and something that he's just been doing super, super well with in terms of getting his fitness up with one of the most famous trainers out there with Douglas, and being able to kind of transcend his game, not just for himself, but seeing how well it's translating onto court. He's currently ranked above Jensen Brooksby, who we thought back in 2021 was going to surpass all the other Americans. But Brandon, to me, is going to be one that is possibly going to win multiple ATP Tour level titles next year. For our next award, we're going to be talking about the most improved. This is a tough category. I will say this is a tough category because we did have a lot of players that showed their amazing potential this past year. And for me, Gill, I don't know how you felt. This was a tough category.
I thought that it was unconventional this year. I love my pick. I'm confident about my pick this year. But I will say, so last year I gave it to Cam Norrie. I thought that
Okay.
was pretty obvious. The
Hmm.
year before, Andrei Rublev, thought that was pretty obvious because those were both players who were, really elevated themselves to a top 10 level.
Hmm.
And previously, we had known them on tour. They were around for a couple years, and they weren't at that level. So that was clear, most improved. This year's choice, at least my choice, is different than Rublev and Nori. I will say that.
Okay.
And
How
it is
how different are we saying? They played so well that we knew that they improved a lot, or is it more in between, you think?
shall I reveal?
Yes, you can.
The reason it's different is because it's the year-end world number one. To me, Carlos Alcaraz is the most improved player this year. He started the year 32 in the world, which to me is just as impressive a jump, if not more impressive. I'm going to say more impressive than going, from 80 to 15, or 60 or 50 to 10, which are those are the kinds of jumps that we're used to seeing win this kind of most improved category. We all know it's infinitely more difficult to jump from 20 to 1 than it is 40 to 20, right? It's the same number of ranking spots, but how many players get stuck up against the very best in the sport, and they can't crack through. They can't get to that tier 1 elite level, where Alcaraz just blew through the yield sign. He started playing as good as anyone can play in the world before we could even really process it. That's how quickly it happened. So Alcaraz going from, he's a great prospect, he's going to be great, but 2022 will probably be that like transitionary year. He probably needs more time. That's not how it ended up.
Yeah.
He arrived. He was ready to compete with anyone this year.
I totally agree, and that's a fantastic nominee. I actually had him kind of as an honorable mention, and we'll get to that part later because I have him nominated for another award. Because for Carlos Alcaraz being the best tennis player of the year, I looked at the ones that were more transcending more into the top 100, the ones that made and hurdled over all the luggage that they were carrying with them. And that's why my nominee this year is Felix Auger-Aliassime, actually winning multiple titles this year, living up to the potential that we all knew he could back in 2021, actually winning four titles. Correct?
I thought it was 5.
5 total, 4 in a row.
No. Was it Stuttgart and then the hat trick 3? Okay, it was 4. You're right. But ATP Cup title, Davis Cup title.
So 6?
I mean, I don't know. It's a gray area.
It's a gray area. I agree. Go ahead.
I think I would have to check this. I think the ATP counts ATP Cup as a title.
Okay.
They definitely don't count Davis Cup because it's a totally separate entity.
Yes, it is. And for me, seeing how he won 3 tournaments in a row, capturing the ATP Cup at the beginning of the year, and then capturing the Davis Cup final title at the end of the year, kind of putting that at a bookend, that's my nominee for most improved in 2022. Now, this one is a little bit broad, but it's one that we always talk about. What was the most memorable tournament for each player? What was the most memorable tournament for yourselves? What was the most memorable tournament for us? So for this category, we have best tournament. Now, Gill, who is your nominee for best tournament overall?
This would usually always be a major, but this was a strange year. In terms of everybody kind of being healthy, you got to look at and able to play. On the men's side, Roland Garros was really your only option. You had a lot of the field missing. Wimbledon, obviously, no Russians, no Belarusians. And COVID, by the way, Berrettini, Cilic, these were contenders. It was kind of decimated. The U.S. Open didn't have Djokovic. The Australian Open didn't have Djokovic. Roland Garros was the one with everything. But I just don't think this was a great French Open. The epic and classic and memorable matches were not aplenty. In fact, I think the match of the tournament was FAA Nadal in the quarterfinals, but
Yeah.
our semis were kind of marred, one with an injury. The final was one-sided. The Djokovic Nadal quarterfinal was not as good as 2021's iteration. My answer is Madrid. I think
Wow, I
Carlos
like it.
Alcaraz. Yeah, I think Carlos Alcaraz taking out Nadal, taking out Djokovic, crushing Zverev in the final. That was one of the more exciting moments of the season. And I think 2022, in a lot of ways, I know we'll get to this later, in some ways will be remembered as, historically as a marker year, a milestone for Carlos Alcaraz. And I felt this was the height of that. This was the height of Alcaraz has arrived. He is for real. He is different. He is special. He is generational. And he plays an epic match with Djokovic. Again, a decimation in the final. And the Nadal match was very special. Alcaraz, Nadal in Spain, in the Spanish capital. I mean, to me, that was probably the best the tour had to offer this year.
I totally agree. And kind of seeing that too is we always use in tennis, for me, we always use changing of the guard loosely. We've been saying that for the past 5 years with the big three. We've been saying that for the past, who knows, year as well, when we saw Alcaraz and his potential last year. Now, it kind of feels like that, though, with Madrid. It came full circle. The young Spaniard taking on essentially the GOAT and the man that's possibly going to be the president of Real Madrid, according to a recent article today. That was a huge rumor. Didn't expect that today. But you go from someone of that magnitude, not just of playing ability, but having that big of a reputation and having that young kid take over from Madrid. And I'm going along the same lines in my nomination because it's also one of those stories that we knew, and we knew coming into it too, because I'm nominating Indian Wells and Taylor Fritz winning that final. And I think, yes, granted the injuries during the final was a little unorthodox, and yes, it wasn't the 100% of both players. Mm-hmm. Whether or not, though, the quarterfinals alone was, just reading it back, it was Alcaraz absolutely destroyed Norrie, which was an unbelievable beatdown. The Nadal-Kyrgios match was probably one of the matches of the year with a 7-6, 5-7, 6-4 victory. Taylor Fritz going to 3, and even Grigor Dimitrov getting a nod at a Masters 1000 tournament again, playing against Rublev. That, for me, was probably the most, I wouldn't say well-rounded, but one of the best storylines of 2022, especially for a tournament that a kid grew up going to and then ended up winning in basically his home state. That's my nomination for best tournament.
Yeah, that was great. I also want to add Korda up 5-2 in the third set on Rafa. That was also one of the more memorable matches of the season.
Exactly. I totally agree. And that's just another anecdote to my nomination as well. Now, this category is a little bit different. I gave it this title because every year when I look back at the year, I never want to say disappointed with a player. I don't think any player wants to hear that next to their name. And I don't think players can say they have had a disappointing year, but they have good takeaways. So to kind of sum up this award, the award name for this is the player that gave you the most hope, but then crushed it in the end. And now it's not trying to make it negative. We're not trying to make it negative here at Tweener Head Tennis. We're not. But the whole goal of this is to talk about a player that you saw do really, really well in big scenarios, and then all of a sudden you expect them to play the same, but they don't. Gill, who is your nomination for this year's gave you hope and then crushed it?
There's a couple of ways you could go with it. There are players who genuinely had frustrating years that seasons that they would like to forget. But I'm gonna nominate a player who actually had, by regular standards, an excellent year, statistically an excellent year. At the same time, did not meet the lofty expectations that were probably set out for him, and that's Daniil Medvedev. It's a player who I had coming into the year, I predicted to finish year-end number 1 and ends up finishing at number 7, which was of all my predictions, besides for Taylor Fritz, who finished top 10, and he was not really on my radar to finish in the top 10. I picked 13 players, the top 10, 3 honorable mentions. Fritz was on the outside of even that. So besides for Taylor Fritz, my biggest miss was Daniil Medvedev. I did not foresee kind of the downward turn that he experienced, especially losing all the finals. Now, there's a lot of things that went wrong for Medvedev this year, which kind of could leave you optimistic for a bounce back next year. But he begins the year losing to Nadal in the Australian Open final from up 2 sets to love. That probably left some scarring mentally. And then at the Sunshine Double, he suffers the hernia, has to have surgery on the hernia. Now, he comes back clay. It's not his surface. Grass court season. He's banned from Wimbledon. So I think that's a difficult situation where you lose motivation. What exactly are you playing for? It was really the North American hardcourt season and the indoor hardcourt season when you expected Medvedev to fully get back on track, and he didn't. That was surprising. And that's why I thought Medvedev is certainly at the forefront of a conversation of players who gave you a lot of hope and crushed it.
And for me, my nomination is along the similar lines. Didn't have bad results this year, but just didn't live up to the expectation that we saw, especially for a player that finished in the top 10 last year. My nomination is Diego Schwartzman. Man that is now 25 in the world. And granted, he is 30 years old, losing back-to-back finals from Buenos Aires and Rio, losing to Casper Ruud and world number 1, Carlos Alcaraz. But then if you look at his results afterwards, didn't make past the second round of Masters 1000 in Indian Wells, didn't make past the first round against Kokkinakis in Miami, lost to Tsitsipas, which isn't a bad loss, in Monte Carlo, and then lost in the semifinals to Barcelona. But then if you keep looking, the best result he had was probably his round of 16 loss against Novak Djokovic moving forward. So to me, a guy that we always wanted to win and we always wanted to succeed, especially always being in that conversation of who's replacing Juan Martín del Potro, for a guy that does have potential, I felt like he kept hitting and missing because he gave you that hope at the beginning of the year, making back-to-back clay court finals, and then absolutely, and it came off away losing to Novak at the French, but after that, nothing really happened. Lost to Rusevori in Hamburg and didn't really live up to that idea of he gave me hope and then immediately brought me back down to earth.
Yeah, very, very rough season for him on hard court.
Yeah,
especially.
Hello guys, Andrea Seppi here. Today I have the honor to present this very special award. And the category I'm presenting is the player who gave you hope and then crashed it on the men's tour. And the winner is Daniil Medvedev. Oh yeah. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Our next award is going out to the 11th man of the year. Now, for those of you that may not know what this award means, there's an award in the NBA, the National Basketball Association, that gives an award to the best player coming off the bench, the one that didn't necessarily start for their team, but had a huge role in their team winning a championship, making it to the playoffs, having the biggest impact that they could. Now, why we call it the 11th man of the year, it's the one that made the cusp, didn't necessarily finish in the top 10, but the one that had a very, very good year without finishing in that top flight of the rankings. Now, Gill, for this award, I did not give you that much time to prepare for it, but for you, who do you think the 11th man of the year award is going to? Who is your nomination?
Hey, I'm fine. I have a slam dunk. I feel confident in my answer.
Okay.
Yannick Sinner.
Ooh.
Yannick Sinner finishes 15 in the world And it feels like he was so much better than that. And the reason for that is because he was a consistent winner week in and week out, a really good match record, really good win percentage. What happened this year, and to be exact, he went 47 and 17, 73% win percentage. The reason why it didn't materialize for some reason in the rankings is because he just didn't have that explosive run in a big event. And he had a terrible record in quarterfinal matches, 2-8. It's a tough number, but to make 10 quarterfinals in a year, that's a really, really awesome number. And then the other factor with Sinner is that he had a match point in the quarterfinal of the US Open against Carlos Alcaraz. And if he wins that point, he likely wins the US Open. Maybe likely is a strong label
word
on it. He's the favorite, right? So I shouldn't say likely, because do I put it over 50%? No. But among the 4 players that would have been remaining, he would have been the favorite.
Pretty ironic, but my 11th man of the year is going to Holger Rune, because while he did finish the 11th player of the year, ironically, but his impact that he had, we knew last year that he had the potential, but this past year, winning 3 titles, and including the Masters 1000 in Paris, which hopefully is not cursed, knock on wood, the sheer dominance that this kid had to constantly push himself through, just being at 19-2, breaking the top 10 at one point throughout the year, but actually performing in that way as a 19-year-old, being the likes of Novak Djokovic in the final, beating Tsitsipas in Stockholm, losing to FAA during his amazing run at the end of the year in Basel. Like, this kid had a lot, even making the quarterfinals at Roland Garros this past year and lost to Casper Ruud, who was a finalist this year. For me, he had a huge impact on this year, and he showed it with his results. For me, that's my 11th man of the year.
Yeah, I mean, he reinvented himself and, I mean, improved throughout the year so drastically. I mean, yes, he was great on the clay with his powerful ground strokes, but for him to hit the indoor hardcourt season and to serve as well as he did was a revelation, and he figured out the physical issues that he had a couple years ago.
Hope you're doing well. My name is Chris, and I'm hoping you can help me present an award for the category you're presenting, the 11th Man of the Year award on the men's tour, and the winner.
I totally agree. And now this is the big one, the big MVP award for the 2022 season. And for me, it's a no-brainer for me, at least. Gill, was this hard to think about?
Somewhat hard, not a slam dunk like last year. Last year was very clearly Novak Djokovic, who went into the US Open with a chance for the Grand Slam. And 2020 was a very difficult year because all 3 players were tied in the number of majors. Wimbledon was canceled. Novak had 1, Rafa had 1, and Dominic Thiem had the 3rd, being the US Open. So that was also kind of a tough year. This is maybe in the middle.
Okay.
Not quite as easy as 2021, but a little bit easier than 2020.
And Gill, who is your nomination for MVP of 2022?
It's the guy who won the most majors. It's Rafael Nadal winning the Australian Open and winning Roland Garros, coming into Wimbledon having only lost twice. Unfortunately, the rest of his year was somewhat ravished by injuries. He was healthy by the time he got healthy, maybe at the very end there for the ATP finals in Paris, where he struggles in those conditions anyway. So it was really all about the first half. He could have stopped playing. He could have stopped playing after the first half of the year, and he would have ended up being probably my player of the year. He didn't help his cause in the second half, that's for sure.
No, definitely did not.
To me, the case to be made for 2 players who won 1 major, Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic, if you're going to give it to one of them, even though Nadal won 2 slams and they each won 1, they would have had to have a very, very convincing, compelling argument that they were much better throughout the year. For Djokovic, well, as dominant as he was, Wimbledon forward in the tournaments that he was able to play, he was a non-factor in the first half of the year. He ends up with 3 big titles on the season. Nadal had 2. It's close, but Nadal's 2 kind of, because they're majors, they overtake. Alcaraz, same thing. 3 big titles. He won Miami, he won Madrid, and he won the U.S. Open. And Nadal had 2. Okay, it's a slight edge, but it's got to be a landslide if you're going to give MVP, in my opinion, to a player who didn't win the most majors.
I agree with that, and you explained exactly why my nomination should be the MVP, in my opinion. But my nomination is Carlos Alcaraz as world number 1, because he could have won most improved and MVP, going from that 30 level type player to the world number 1, and being the same age as Holger Rune as well, at 19 years old, beating the likes of Novak Djokovic, beating the likes of Rafael Nadal on clay, I must say as well. Those are things, to me, when you look at a player and in terms of star caliber player, for me, that made the biggest impact on tour, that not only as a player on court, but as a player off court, that made waves in headlines and did so much more. Carlos Alcaraz, to me, was that most valuable player by far, just because of his storyline and everything that kind of encompassed his 2022 season.
So narratively, I agree with you. What I mean by that is, when we look at 2022, 5-10 years from now, I believe it will have a particular meaning to us in the sense that it was Carlos Alcaraz's arrival. Just like we look at 2005 as kind of when Rafa came up. And we might look at a 2008 as Novak's year. For Federer, it was a little bit more gradual. But we have these years that are remembered for a young player like that rising up. And 2022 is the Alcaraz year. So I think historically, his season harbors the most significance. But if I look at who was the most successful, like, would Alcaraz, well, for a young player and injuries, it's kind of complicated, but who do I think had the year that players would most envy in terms of results? I do think, you take the 2 slams. Yeah. I think if Djokovic or Alcaraz could switch places with Nadal, and I mean, throw aside the fact that if Alcaraz was injured as much as Rafa, it'd be alarming.
It'd be a huge issue.
Yeah, a huge issue and very bad. But if we live in a fantasy world where that wouldn't be the reason, I feel like both players would take Rafa's results, Rafa's years. You take the 2 majors.
I agree with you there. It's just going to be up to the public and our special guests that are announcing the winners as we go along with this video. But let us know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. Would love to hear your opinions on the 2022 season. And again, Gill, as not only as my co-host for today, but hopefully I can call you a friend, and doing this with me and being a part of the Tweener Head Tennis channel, I couldn't thank you more. And Gill, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your afternoon coffee, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the 2023 ATP season.